Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Sleep is important to every part of the body. Our bodies are quite active during sleep and carry out many important functions that affect us physically and mentally. In this episode, Dr. Armstrong and Corbin Bruton discuss sleep, the importance of sleep, having a regular sleep cycle, exercise, and the factors that affect one's sleep and help us to sleep well as we age well.
Hey, Dr. Armstrong, did you hear about that heat wave that we're about to get?
About to get it.
Yeah, we're about
it's pretty hot right now.
It is. It's going to hit the hundreds. And it got me thinking, I don't have air conditioning in my apartment. And that's really going to mess with my sleep pattern. I hate it when it gets too hot. Anyways, speaking of sleep, I was thinking what a perfect subject that we can actually dive into for our podcast today. I personally think that sleep is one of the most underrated things. We don't really look at it as far as our health or well-being, but it's arguably one of the most important. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have a regular bedtime?
I try to have a regular bedtime. I'm not spot on like you, but after listening to that last podcast that we just did, I was like, dang, he's got a bedtime. He's kind of got everything together. I need to get on an actual schedule.
Together.
So, but yeah, let's talk about the importance of sleep and what it does to your body, your brain, your mind, your mental well-being, your physical well-being. Let's talk about that. Let's dive into it.
Sounds good.
All right. So there's a really cool article that's out there by the University of Michigan, and they actually talk about sleep. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. What is sleep exactly? And how does it help us stay healthy? Sleep is an altered state of consciousness where we have to limit the interactions with our surroundings and are relatively quiet and still, depending on the stages of what sleep we're actually doing. Contrary to our quiet physical state, the brain is very active during sleep, carrying out many important functions. Sleep is essential to every process in the body, affecting our physical and mental function for the next day, our ability to fight diseases and develop immunity, and our metabolism and chronic disease risk. Sleep is truly interdisciplinary because it touches every aspect of health. I mean, that pretty much sums it up if you think about it.
So the podcast is done, I guess. Huh? Just go to bed.
Yeah, go to bed.
It kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember my admonishments at exam time whenever you were a student. Remember the life lessons I learned in college that I kind of tried to pass on to my students. I'm not sure how well they listened to it, but I'd always stressed about not cramming the night before the test, the importance of getting to bed early, something that I had learned from a couple of my different professors at West Virginia University when I was an undergrad. And this idea that you're going to learn more actually by going to bed early, because the night before an exam, your brain is really trying to process and to sort all that information in preparation for the test. And when we're up late, we're not giving the brain the opportunity to kind of process and store that information. And so one of the best things you can do is just get to bed early. And I always joked, you'll have dreams about my lectures in your sleep, but you'll be processing those things. You'll be much better prepared. And I think we tend to forget that. I think we feel like we have to stay up and do in order to accomplish more. Whereas oftentimes it's that what Jim Harshaw Jr. would call his productive pause. And sleep is part of that productive pause. It's like taking that time in the day where we allow our body, our mind, our spirit, everything to fully recover from the events of the day prior, allowing us to adapt both spiritually, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and socially for the next day.
It's kind of like hitting the reset button on your computer when it's starts getting that extra lag time really slow. You just set it in reset mode, it resets itself, and then it's a lot faster. It's kind of like we're setting a physical reset button on our bodies by putting it to sleep.
Well, in that computer analogy, I mean, you keep a bunch of windows open in your computer, it's processing, it's doing all of that stuff simultaneously. It really begins to slow down the processes. You have to shut down a few of them so that they, can operate appropriately.
You mentioned talking to your students about sleep, and I just remembered our old football coach from high school. He used to tell us it doesn't matter about the sleep that you get the night before. It's actually the night before the night before. He's like, get a good night's rest on that Wednesday night, because Thursday you're going to be really excited and it's going to it's going to affect you. So make sure Wednesday you're getting a lot of sleep, because the excitement of the game leading up to that Friday, it will affect your sleep pattern. And for a lot of the players, that actually was true. Now, I don't know. Have you noticed that as a college professor? Have you noticed, probably not, but
Yeah, I'm not sure how much my students are actually sleeping and listening to me when I tell them to get sleep, but I see it possibly in my own kids. I've been stressing a lot more frequently to my son who's trying to, as I keep mentioning, trying to gain weight and strength for the upcoming wrestling season, that he needs regular sleep.
mm,
You can't, and especially now that school's out, the kids get even worse with their sleep patterns. They want to stay up late and then sleep in, and then you have days where you have to get up early. It really throws you off. And I kind of appreciate what he was telling you all, but I think it goes a little bit beyond that. I mean,
mhm.
I really think that, and I think this is pretty sound within the literature, is that regular sleep is most critical. It's not so important to, I mean, it's important, but it's not that we can just kind of make up for all, say 5 days of bad sleeping patterns the night before performance. And then 2 nights before we get 10 or 12 hours of sleep. And then the night before the performance, hopefully we get a good night's sleep, but we'll probably be a little bit more restless because we're, processing all of that. And I think it's important in the article that you talked about, it talks about the fact, and you just mentioned that, contrary to our quiet physical state, the brain is actually very active during sleep. And so we may get a very good restful sleep, but our brain is going, with high energy during that period of time. And so the night before a competition, a performance, an exam, or something like that, we may actually, our brain is maybe more active, but our body needs to be more physically rested in order to perform adequately. There's a lot of things that go on during the sleep that help to facilitate physical recovery from exercise and, from just the day-to-day stresses of life. And so I would take that a step further and say, get a regular night's sleep every night and don't deviate from that.
What do you think would cause that actual higher levels of brain activity? Is it just your body is fully rested, so you're hitting a deep REM sleep? Is it the fact that your neurotransmitters in your brain are really firing off to kind of just reset the body and get it fully rested and prepped for the next day? Like, it's kind of like working behind the scenes. It's like the night shift crew in at a really good facility. You don't ever really see them because they come in during the daytime, but when you arrive at work, everything's clean and prepped and ready to go.
It's the crews at Disney that are in there changing all the light bulbs
Yep.
and cleaning everything. That's kind of the thing. Yeah, our brain is kind of in high gear, processing information, dealing with things that may be weighing heavy on our mind. If you really think about some of the dreams that you have sometimes, as weird as they might be, they're oftentimes allowing your brain to it's kind of your brain processing that information and sorting things out, making decisions. It's kind of, weird that for me that a lot of my dreams will kind of pattern after what I might be kind of watching more on TV. Like lately, I've been watching a little bit more of The Walking Dead. So, zombies tend to be a little bit more into these dreams. But if I really look at them, it's something that I'm trying to kind of sort out, a decision that I'm trying to make or something that I'm trying to process. But also, our brains regulate our hormonal activity and things like that. And so that increased activity is also very closely tied to our endocrine system and other physiological systems, and just kind of getting them regulated in order to be prepared for the next day.
Speaking of dreams, did you know that a lot of people actually don't have dreams? It's because they're never really hitting that that deep level of REM sleep. Specifically, those individuals that aren't hitting it, not all of them, but a good majority of them actually have sleep apnea, which is affecting their ability to hit that deep REM sleep. And so because they're not hitting that deep REM sleep and they're not hitting that actual reset button, it's really interesting. A lot of the side effects of sleep apnea, some of the side effects may include depression, forgetfulness, irritability, headaches, which obviously would make sense because they're not getting enough oxygen, restless sleep, morning sleepiness, snoring, dry mouth, gasping for air while attempting to sleep, the sore throat, night sweats, sleep apnea, because they're not hitting that super restful sleep, and it is affecting their brain. They have a 40% increase of getting ADHD, a 73% increase of developing Alzheimer's, 45% chance of having depression, a 63% chance of having a stroke, 72% chance of getting diabetes, 76% chance of heart failure, an 83% chance of resistance hypertension, 57% of CAD, 49% of needing an AFib, 24% chance of acid reflux, and 77% chance of being obese.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. So what you're saying is that sleep is important to aging well.
I think it is important to aging well. And most of those things that we talked about, think how frustrating it'd be, that someone's listening to one of our past podcasts and they're like, I want to make this lifestyle change. I think I'm going to do a 5x5 program. I think I'm going to start eating healthier. And then they're not seeing those results. Well, they're not seeing the results that they're wanting to. And it's probably because they're not getting adequate amount of sleep. So their body's not actually recovering, right? And then when your body doesn't fully recover, you're going to seem a little bit more agitated, and then you're going to not get the results, and that's going to affect your mental state. It has a whole spiral effect, and when I was younger, you mentioned your son, I had a very similar mindset where I was like, I don't need sleep. I can keep going and going and going and going and going. And once I hit my 30s, I was like, sleep's important. It really, really is important. Like, okay, I don't have sleep apnea, but I'm not getting good sleep. Well, let's talk about some of the things that actually can also affect our sleep. How does what we eat impact our sleep? It's well known that certain substances, such as caffeine, can affect the onset of sleep in a negative way. On the other hand, evidence is growing that shows how other foods like tart cherries, kiwi, fatty fish like salmon and tuna, malted milk may have beneficial effects on the sleep. More recently, studies have shown that healthy dietary patterns overall, not just specific food, can be associated with longer sleep duration and shorter time to fall asleep.
So, what are some of those healthy dietary patterns?
Some of the stuff that's mentioned on there, besides the fruit, it kind of seems like one of the diets that we were talking about not too long
Yeah, I
ago.
think a lot of what we've been talking about with diet for aging well will kind of fit into that. Having not only a regular sleep pattern, but also regular eating patterns, balancing out those meals throughout the day, whether it's intermittent fasting or whether you're going high frequency meal patterns in order to, spacing out your proteins, making sure that we're not eating the foods that are going to be most disruptive of sleep. It's probably not a good idea before going to bed to have, an order of ghost pepper wings or something like that, because it's going to, give you a greater stomach upset that's going to make it harder to sleep. So the quality and the types of foods that we're going to eat are important. But I think it's, just healthy patterns in general that are going to be more effectively associated with sleep duration and the quality of sleep that we get, how well we can fall asleep quickly and get into that restful sleep. And what are those things that we can do to be healthier that will affect our sleep?
I do think it's really interesting that they added malted milk as being beneficial for sleep. And I would think that would actually be anything with milk may have, well, I guess it kind of depends on your body, but a lot of people have a mild milk allergy. Not to a degree like like they're lactose intolerant, and as soon as they consume any form of milk, they're just letting it out, right?
There.
But some of them, when they drink milk, they get a lot of phlegm in the back of their throat or nasally, and that's just a super mild milk allergy. So I would think that milk would actually not be associated with good sleep, just because it can constrict those nasal cavities. But it also goes back to those old wives' tales of like, oh, if you're tired, just drink some warm milk. Mm-hmm. Right? That was an old remedy from back in the day.
I believe milk has a bit of tryptophan in it, similar to turkey, that helps to promote some of that drowsiness. And so if you're not lactose intolerant or you can tolerate milk, then it probably certainly has some benefits to helping you to sleep. And so it's again one of those things, we always preach the principle of individuality on this podcast.
Right.
That everything doesn't work for everyone, and what works for someone else doesn't necessarily work for us. So if it works for you, we need to find those things that are going to help us to get better sleep. I had a colleague a number of years ago, Sandy Brenner, who was a nutritionist, that taught us that if you have trouble sleeping, have a little bit of sugared candy or something like that right before bed, because that little bit of an insulin spike, your sugar levels spike up, insulin spikes up. And then what happens when we typically, spike that insulin and then all that sugar and glucose goes into the cell? What happens next? We tend to have a sugar crash, right? And when better to have a sugar crash? When you're trying to sleep. And so it makes a little bit of sense, that, but again, you have to consider what effect is that added sugar having on the rest of my health. And for some people, it may not be as beneficial as it might be for others. But, we got to find those little things that help to facilitate us getting to sleep more easily. And it will help us to stay, sleeping for a longer period of time. And we also need to have a regular waking time as well and get those normal sleep cycles going. So for some people, it might be taking melatonin in order to regularly get to bed. For some people, it's going to be regulating the lighting patterns in your home in order to facilitate sleep. I mean, we should start probably as the evening draws to a conclusion. We should start dimming the lights a little bit, and certainly we need to step away from our computers, our phones, our iPads, the television, and all those types of things. I think one of the worst things that people can do for their sleep patterns is to have a TV in their bedroom, which really, what do you need a TV in your bedroom for? Second would be, checking their iPhones, or, getting on their computers, or on, playing on their iPads just before they're going to bed. Laying in bed with that blue light flashing in your face is probably one of the worst things you can do to actually get to sleep.
That's interesting you say that. That's something my mom always used to say when I was younger, like, don't look at your phone. Like, you shouldn't be looking at it. You should at least wait 2.5, 3 hours from the last time you looked at it before you went to bed. And I was like, nah, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. And then I went to college, and then I started taking courses and doing a lot of research. And you're right. It turns out like our body it can't decipher the difference between blue light coming out of your computer and then the blue light that the sun gives off. So if you notice, like during summertime, people usually have a lot more energy because the sun's out. It could be that you're getting more vitamin D, or it could be that blue light effect, right? You're just more energetic. You're just more like, oh, I got to get up. I got to go. Versus wintertime, you're like, oh, I don't want to get out of bed. Kind of same concept.
As we say in Oregon, 9 months out of the year.
Yes, here in the valley, especially, yeah. But I think it's really interesting because we're kind of we're living in a world now where we are just surrounded and bombarded with blue lights everywhere. Our phones have it. Everyone has to check their phone right before bed, whether you're checking your work emails, or if you're into social media, or you're looking at the news, or a lot of people do have TVs and they want to come home and they want to just rest and veg out in front of a TV, or whatever the case may be. We're literally just bombarded with blue light. Most of us work, or we're in school and we have to do a lot of research, or we have to do our job on a computer, involving a computer. I know for me, at my job, I'm on a computer all day long, literally. So it's really interesting. I just had one buddy, and he got those blue light glasses, right? He doesn't need glasses at all. He's got 20/20, probably 20/10 vision in both eyes. And it's as one does when they talk to their childhood best friend, is we just started, flicking crap at each other. And I was like, what are you wearing those glasses for, you nerd? And he's like, oh, buddy, these are a game changer. I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, they block out all the blue light. And I was like, does that really make a difference? Does that really affect? And he's like, yeah, best sleep you'll ever get. And I talked to another individual who recently, they've done the same thing with their glasses. And I was like, hey, random question. I've noticed you've been wearing that. How has that affected your sleep? They're like, honestly, I'm going to bed and I'm hitting deep sleep. Like, I'm waking up feeling a lot more well rested. And that's so crazy because I feel like blue light has such a huge effect on us. And yet it's completely out of our control. If you really think about it, we have to work on a computer for our job. Maybe it'd be wise to set that blue light or that yellow light setting so we're not absorbing so much blue light. But I don't know. I feel like something that's constantly all around us is affecting us so much, but it's out of our control. Like,
so I don't agree that it's out of our control.
Really?
I mean, yes, if you work a job where you have to be at the computer all day, that's what, 8 hours of your day,
right?
Maybe 10. I don't know too many people that work a 16-hour at a computer type of job. There are people that work, long hours and things like that, but that's not necessarily out of our control. Although, we can make adjustments like wearing the blue glasses or, adjusting the screen. And I think computers, particularly, I'm an Apple user, and Apple has done a very good job of it. Annoys me sometimes, but the screen changes according to periods of the day. So it kind of becomes black behind. So it reduces that blue light. So it reduces some of that effect. But it is our choice whether we continue once our work is done to come home and get on another blue screen. And I think for a lot of us, especially in our society today, I kind of laughed when you were talking about your mother talking about, getting off your phone or, not looking at your phone. It's like, yeah, that's something my mom has never said to me because it didn't exist when I was a teenager. In the 70s, we didn't really even have the TV to bother us that late at night. I mean, quality TV was generally over by about 9 o'clock. And there wasn't as much distraction for us to stay up late at night. It's not like you can really be on the phone with your friends either because your parents would be yelling at you, get off the phone.
Right.
Because you only had one phone in the house. It was like Saturday evenings, I think, were usually when we tended to stay up the latest. And that was, I grew up in the era where Saturday Night Live kind of entered in. I grew up in Pittsburgh where we had Chiller Theater on Saturday nights. We were actually one of the last cities to get Saturday Night Live because Chiller Theater was so popular. And that was at 11 o'clock and it was on NBC.
Huh.
But, I remember many times trying to stay up to watch Night of the Living Dead every time it was on Chiller Theater, and I'd fall asleep. I couldn't stay up late enough. But we didn't have those distractions to force us to kind of stay up. And we also really didn't have daylight savings time the way we have it now to disrupt those sleep patterns. Now, I think we do have a choice.
You didn't have daylight savings in the 70s?
I'm trying to remember when that started. I don't seem to recall.
Wasn't that invented by Ben Franklin?
No, it wasn't invented by Ben Franklin. We certainly didn't utilize it since Ben Franklin's time. I mean, it goes back. I'd have to look at the history there, and that might be another podcast, I guess. But we're not a history podcast, but I know it's relatively new. But and it's something that arguably we probably should get rid of because
they just passed, didn't they? That we're getting rid of it next year in 2023.
So. I think so, and I think that's a very smart move. It's always been pretty stupid to me to have that. But, there's not too much that politicians have decided that I don't think is stupid anymore. But that the idea of screen time, there's a lot going on. I mean, obviously it's the blue light, it's the stimulus to your brain. So you're checking email. Say you get a email from a friend or a text message from a friend that you're not really sure their intention. Are they mad at me? Or they, or is it bad news? And your brain is now struggling with all of that. And it just, again, disrupts all of that normal brain activity that we want to have during sleep. Or you watch a scary movie or, you read something that is, more stressful to you. It elevates that anxiety level in our brains and it makes it much more difficult for us to fall asleep. And we have a choice of when we put those screens away. And again, if you have a regular sleep pattern, a bedtime and a rising time that is relatively stable, give or take maybe a half hour on either side, you're more likely to say, okay, I have a 9 o'clock bedtime. Sounds odd for a 59-year-old. That's my bedtime is 9 o'clock. I went back to having a bedtime. I probably screamed about having a bedtime as a child, but now as a mature, and I put air quotes around mature adult, I need to have a bedtime because I get up early, but I get up and I go to bed about the same time every day. But I can say, okay, 9 o'clock is my bedtime. I got to shut off the electronics and everything. Ideally, it should be at least an hour before bed. Maybe begin to kind of turn the lights down, do something a bit more relaxing. And then just get ready for bed, start having that preparation for bed. I think we can all turn our screens off at least an hour before bedtime.
It's doable.
And, the amount of sleep that we need, I think that can be a bit arguable. Much of the literature says that adolescents need about 10 to 12 hours of sleep. Most commonly we hear, we need 7 to 8 hours of sleep as adults. If you listen to Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he said, about if you're sleeping more than 6 hours, sleep faster, right? I look at that and say, okay, well, there's somebody who physiologically certainly needed a lot of recovery time in order to be building the muscles and things that he was doing, and diet had to be in control. To say that, 6 hours is all you really need, and just what he's basically saying is not sleep faster, but sleep better.
Yeah, hit that REM sleep.
So I would say anywhere from 6 to 8 hours should be kind of planned sleep. And, for me, I look at probably, trying to get to bed about 9 o'clock, getting up, I attempt to get up about 4:30. Sometimes it's a little bit closer to 5 to work out. But say I go, 9 to 5, that's 8 hours of sleep. Now, that might not all be quality sleep. It may take me an hour or so to actually fall asleep on nights that maybe I didn't do things as well as I should have in terms of preparing for sleep. But I can generally get by on 6 hours of good quality sleep if I prepare myself for that. And so I think that is something we really need to consider, is what are we doing that is disrupting our quality of sleep?
Well, I know there's going to be someone that's listening to this and they're going to be like, these guys don't know what they're talking about.
We don't.
I'm following my favorite role model or whatever, and they're super successful and they're not getting that much sleep. I actually encourage you to do more research on that. If you look at some of the most successful people in this world, Dr. Armstrong is correct. They're getting on average in that 6 hour window of sleep. They're not averaging 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. Now, yes, there are going to be certain scenarios where they have sacrificed for a short period of time and they've gone into that. But on average, most of those go-getters, most of those really tenacious people, they do set a bedtime for themselves because they also have their ambition and their goals, and they know what it is that they're going to achieve. And the more sleep they get, and they set that bedtime, that means they can wake up at a certain hour ready to go and hit the ground running. You look at literally anyone who's super successful right now, and if you watch an interview with any of them, they will say that, yeah, I definitely have sacrificed. I was averaging 3 hours of sleep, and now I'm back on a steady sleep schedule, and I'm getting anywhere between 6 to 7 hours. That's a good window for me.
I believe, I'm not sure the specific time, but I recall reading not too long ago about Mark Wahlberg's schedule.
Yeah.
And he actually goes to bed about 7 o'clock.
He does.
And he's like, really? Mark Wahlberg goes to bed at 7 o'clock? It just doesn't seem right. But he gets up at like 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And
he works out,
does all that stuff. And he kind of patterns around his family. He's got younger kids. So younger kids are going to bed early. He gets to bed early and then he gets up. And that's one thing I like. I go to bed early. My family laughs at me. Everybody else stays up a lot later than me. They don't listen to me the way I hope my podcast listeners listen to me. But I'm up early. Mm-hmm. And I have, most cases, especially on the weekends, I have a good 1 to 2, sometimes 3 hours of just really quiet time available to me to just get things done. I mean, as we record this, everybody else is sleeping in the house. That's why we're recording when we're recording, is because it's guaranteed quiet. But you get a lot more done. Yeah. And I find I'm much, much more productive when I get up early. And I think that's, what Mark Wahlberg is doing. He's allowing himself his most productive time to be the time when there's no other distractions that are going to diminish that productivity.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when I was younger, I used to be a night owl. And I was like, well, I can get my productivity done at nighttime. Not necessarily, right? Because the older I'm getting, the more I realize the earlier I wake up, I feel like I'm not wasting my whole day. And I feel like I get a head start on it. That's a real interesting mindset. One of the things that you also mentioned was if you're looking at something or reading something or doing something right before bed, it definitely affects your mindset. And us talking about like exercise and all that, it's really funny. There's a lot of bodybuilders that are out there, but one famous one, Rich Piana, he used to always say, and he was a huge advocate, like train your arms or do something right before bed. Get light weights and just do a heavy superset of like 50 to 100 reps at a time and get that blood flow, feel that blood flow, and then go to bed. He goes, that's going to be the last thing that you're thinking about and you're going to be dreaming. And that was just something that he kind of believed in, of that mind over matter. Now, obviously, that may not be the best approach, but thinking right before you're going to bed that, wow, I'm hitting a goal, it could have some psychological effect, which, back when I was in college taking sports psychology, 1/3 of what we think, it affects our body by 1/3. Does that make sense? So if we're thinking about something and we're truly believing in it, your body has 1/3 of that effect, and your body will actually start to have that reaction.
Sounds interesting.
Sounds
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, I'm a little curious about and I would want to probably put a little bit of a disclaimer on the exercising right before bed. I think
Correct.
what he's saying is not doing an intensive workout, just doing something, getting the blood flowing a little bit prior to bed. I think, principally if he's doing high volume, very low resistance bicep curls prior to bed, he may be benefiting during the sleep of kind of heightened protein synthesis and the higher levels of growth hormone that occur during sleep, because that's when the bulk of our growth hormone is released. And that's why sleep is such an important aspect of recovery from exercise. But I would caution people not to do very heavy exercise immediately prior to bed, because it's going to disrupt your ability to sleep. You generally want to have a good 2 to 3 hours prior to sleep before you're actually, you want to exercise a good 2 to 3 hours prior to sleep.
Yes. Thank you for clearing that up. So speaking of the importance of sleep, why is sleep so important for young children? And what are some of the common negative effects of poor sleep? Sleep is important for every part of the body, and it is especially important for young children as their bodies and minds develop. In young children, lack of sleep or poor quality sleep can be associated with difficult behaviors, lower capacity to learn and retain information, and low propensity for poor eating patterns and weight gain.
Yeah, which makes it interesting, that over these last couple of years, and we've pushed kids more toward online learning, but also not only just because of COVID and the Zoom classes and all that kind of stuff, but an increasing amount of my kids' homework now is all forced onto the computers.
Right.
Which there's many things wrong with that. For one, the quality of internet varies across the population. Based on socioeconomic status and things like that. So it can put poorer kids at a disadvantage to learning. But also it's putting kids in front of those screens late at night as they do their homework. Because oftentimes, most kids, as kids are going to put off their homework as late as possible and say, oh, I got that, history assignment I got to do. It's due tomorrow morning and I got to get in. And I know my daughter has been working on homework. It was due at midnight a certain night, and she's working on it up until midnight. And that's putting kids in front of those screens. That's disrupting their sleep. We do everything. How do I want to phrase this? We seem to just do everything wrong when it comes to making kids better prepared to be educated and to learn in school. We have really odd stop times for school. We have athletic events and practices. I mean, for many sports things, kids, my son played football. I forget what grade level it was. They were practicing until like after 9 o'clock. And you get the kid home and get him into bed in time. Come on, that ain't going to happen. They're not going to get their 10 to 12 hours of sleep. We have seriously diminished physical activity time in schools for the sake of sitting in a classroom doing boring assignments and not moving. But we have them doing this homework online, and they're putting them in front of screens. And I reap the benefits of that when I have to grade papers in colleges with kids' penmanship. Just really, I mean, we talk about what grade level students can read at. I tend to say that probably the average college student's penmanship is at about a third grade level. And so, we have to consider those things beyond just the fact that, what are we doing to educate kids? We want to look at what are we doing to allow them the opportunity to most effectively learn and to grow physically. I mean, if they're not getting sleep, they're not getting their physiological development that they need.
Well, and we also talked about the psychological development as well, like the increase of ADD and depression.
And then we want to blame COVID on depression. Well, maybe some of this depression is the fact that, these kids are on their computers.
Right. Well, and then you also mentioned like they're eliminating physical activity in schools. I do know a lot of schools here in Oregon for a small amount of time. It's since changed, but they cut back budget on PE courses, which I think that should be arguably one of the most important. And a lot of things, a lot of my friends or people that I know, they kind of everyone has a child roughly in the same age bracket in that 5 to 6 range or in that 2 to 3 range. And a lot of, I was really surprised to see a lot of kids, they have their own tablets or they're using their parents' phone to watch stuff and they're just super engaged. And I'm sure that older generation, like when Sega Genesis or Nintendo came out, they would look at us like something's not right. These kids shouldn't be staring in front of that screen. But for me, seeing a kid with their own tablet, that's a weird concept for me. I don't know. I think we should.
It's weird for you. You're a lot younger than me. It's weird for me, and it was something I fought for years. But you kind of get to a point too where, in terms of being able to communicate with your kids, the phones are necessary. Because you don't have landlines anymore, or, you don't have, means of your kids kind of communicating with you to let you know that they need to be picked up from school or this and that. And so, we got phones for the kids much, much earlier than I would have preferred to. And they do overuse them. And it's my son's a little bit better than my daughter, I think, when it comes to phone screen time. Computer screen time might be a little bit different. But it has become a means of babysitting the kids, and I think we are seeing parents that have grown up in a growing kind of informational age where now they're on their phones so much and the kids are just going to kind of mimic what the parents are doing. And we feel like and there's some literature out there that there are some benefits to it in terms of some of the learning that happens, but it's the quality of what the kids are doing on those phones makes a difference, or on those iPads. But we do need to just kind of get away from this whole increased screen time and try and get people away from their computers, away from their phones, away from their iPads, doing more physical activity, and just turning everything off, if not for a day at a time or a week at a time, at least an hour before bedtime. Just, okay, we're done. This is time to begin to unwind, read a book, those paper things. We tend to read, and that's another thing a lot of people do, and And I'm probably as guilty of it because most of my books now are on my iPad, but I can carry so much literature around with me with that
Right.
thing. But, you have to, pick up a book and read that in your bed if need something to do prior to sleep. I would strongly encourage in that last hour, and it's something I need to get back to doing a little bit more myself, is taking a little end of the day journaling. I'm pretty good about doing it first thing in the morning in those early hours where I have the quiet time, where I kind of set goals for the day, where I, look at, what is my mission statement? What do I value? Try and get myself focused positively for the day. But there was a time, and it was a lot easier before I had, a wife and kids, to be able to, at the end of the day, process what did I learn from the day? What was, good about the day? What do I need to work on? And I know you've talked about this in the previous podcast about, kind of at the end of the day, kind of setting goals for the next day.
Yep.
I also liked to, from my readings, end the day with a positive quote. Just something, put in something positive in my mind that helps to kind of get my sleep focused in a certain mental direction, if that makes any sense.
Well, this may not tie in with sleep, but it does tie in with reading and the writing aspect that you've learned. One thing about screen time is you're just staring. One thing about holding a book in your hand, you're feeling that weight. You're able to use you're tactically moving the pages versus just kind of scrolling or swiping on a screen. But another thing is you're actually smelling the book. Like books have a smell. Those pages, that paper, it has a smell, which smells can definitely improve memory. So whatever you're reading, to me, logically, you're kind of absorbing that information a little bit better, a little bit more. And then doing the act of actually writing something out or writing something down, not only are you thinking about it mentally, but you're also physically performing the activity that you're thinking about, which in return is also going to have kind of a deeper effect. And I do apologize. You guys probably hear me sniffing. It's allergy season here in the Willamette Valley, and I am having some effects, which is also going to affect my sleep pattern as well.
Or maybe your sleep patterns affecting your immune system response.
Oh man, yep. What sleep needs do adolescents have, and what does this mean for the current conversation we're having around school days, start time? Adolescents need around 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night, but a high portion do not get that amount. For example, recent estimates suggest that 60% of middle schoolers and 70% of high schoolers don't get adequate sleep on school nights. This figure is even higher for Michigan high schoolers, which at 80%, one of the main reasons adolescents are so sleep deprived is that biological change in their brain effects when they feel sleepy. So even if they are sleep deprived, they often can't go to bed early because their brain is not prepared to sleep. The problem with these delayed bedtimes is that school or before school activities often start very early, so adolescents may end up chronically sleep deprived. In school districts that have enacted later school start times, research is consistently showing that students get more sleep and as a result have fewer motor vehicle accidents, better grades, and improved mental health. I would have loved to have a later school time when I was growing up. But I was also involved in sports and we were waking up super, super early and we were getting to school before anyone else and hitting the weight room and lifting heavy and just getting after it, like right before school even started.
I think it comes down to a bit more of the concept of just having a more regular sleep pattern. I'm not so convinced of the literature, and I know, I'm stepping out of my science realm, and there are people who do research in this stuff and make these decisions. But regarding school start times, you know, the fact that, kids need 10 to 12 hours of sleep. And so we push the school day later in the day, as opposed to starting it earlier and getting through all those activities, having more time to get those activities done, and then stressing that the kids just need to get to bed a little bit earlier makes a little bit better sense. I mean, you have a lot of, we have a lot of rural areas in Oregon, and those kids might be still helping out on the farms and things like that, which is some of the reasons why we instituted daylight savings time when we did. But, I don't know that it's so much being able to sleep later in the day in order to get those hours of sleep. I think we just need to structure the day a little bit better so that kids are getting the things done that they need to do, getting to bed at a reasonable time. And, again, pushing the school day later, and we still have sports and other extracurricular activities after school. We're not benefiting anything by letting them sleep a little bit later in the day. I think they're still going to get the same lack of sleep that they're getting if the school day started a little bit earlier. I think one of the big problems as a parent is that, we have different start times for the different grade levels, which I think is more for saving on bus transit than it really is about, the benefits for the kids. But I think, it puts a lot of burden on parents as well when we have all that different time structure and things like that. I'd complain till I'm blue in the face when it comes to some of that. But the fact of the matter is we just need to find ways for not only our older adults, but our maturing adolescents and our young children to get the sleep that they need. And I think we also have to consider that many of these kids are athletes or involved in other activities. And we know that sleep can benefit athletes by improving recovery time, by improving mood. It will improve mood in all kids. It will have a better effect on regulating cortisol levels, on insulin levels. So we see better maybe glycogen synthesis in people who are getting adequate sleep. It's going to benefit them in terms of their exercise capabilities, their perceived exertion during exercise. And so it's important for athletes, but also, if we consider performance in any age group, it's going to improve performance, whether it's athletic performance, work performance, mental performance, the list goes on.
We've kind of beaten a dead horse as far as the subject of daylight savings go. You're mentioning the importance of physical health, but how important is sleep for our mental health? Sleep and mental health go hand in hand. Good sleep is essential for maintaining our baseline mental health, as one night of sleep deprivation can dramatically affect mood the next day. Chronic exposure to poor sleep quality is associated with depression, anxiety, and other conditions. There are also bidirectional association, meaning that experiencing anxiety and depression very often affects sleep, which then impacts the ability to cope with the anxiety and depression and so on. So it's kind of an endless cycle, honestly. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're feeling anxious. And then when you do try and sleep, that anxiety comes in. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to get to sleep. I got so much stuff I got to get done. I'm not going to be ready for the day. And it just kind of builds up that anxiousness. And then with anxiety, it does kind of go hand in glove with depression for a lot of individuals. And then they're not mentally there due to the anxiety, causing them to have effect on their sleep pattern. And then they don't feel like they're being as successful as they can be, which in return is going to affect that depression. And they're going to feel blue, which in return is they're going to feel that, oh no, I gotta get up to this level. I can't be sad right now. And that's going to spike the anxiety, and then it's going to spike the sleep pattern. It's kind of an endless circle, right?
Yeah.
It's really important to get sleep, guys.
And so how do we improve one's capacity to get a good night's sleep? We've talked about having a bedtime, having
Mm-hmm.
a raising, so plan sleep into your day. I would say along with that, plan your diet into the day and considering what you eat in specific meals. Find those things that are going to help you to get to bed more restfully. So whatever foods work for you, if it's malted milk or if it's tart cherries or whatever it might be, doing that on a regular basis as part of your sleep preparation, turning off the electronics for at least an hour before bedtime, exercise. Gee, we've got to get around to exercise in this podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of our foundational things. And exercise, we know, improves the quality of sleep. It even has been shown, independent of other regulatory factors, to improve sleep apnea. And that's regardless of weight loss or obesity or any of those kind of things. It's something that is not something that improves the sleep while you're sleeping. Like, if you use the was it CPAPs,
Mm-hmm.
to help you to breathe, those are only helping you while you're sleeping. They're only helping you because you're using it. Exercise is going to help you to be able to sleep more effectively. And all the other things that go along with exercise help to kind of regulate some of those other things, anxiety levels, cortisol levels, growth hormone levels, all those types of things that come along with sleep patterns. And then as well, maybe considering how and when we use alcohol.
I was just going to dive right into that.
Yeah, we don't want to necessarily be drinking alcohol prior to bedtime. Generally, the recommendation is at least a couple hours prior to bed, not having another drink. Let the alcohol get out of your system. We tend to think alcohol helps us to sleep, and it might kind of put us to sleep. You drink enough, you kind of pass out drunk. That's not giving you restful sleep. That's just giving you drunken sleep, and your body is not going to adapt to that.
Which is funny because there's an old wives' tale is like, oh, I'm just going to have a nightcap before bed. I'm just going to have that cocktail or that shot of whiskey. That older generation, when I used to work at that assisted living, there's a few residents where it was in their medical charts. I don't know how they got it approved by a doctor, but it was. Some of them would take one shot of bourbon right before bed. To me, I don't sleep very well if I drink, this article kind of dives a little bit into that. There's several studies out there that alcohol really affects our sleep pattern altogether. You don't get a good night's rest. You do not get a restful night's sleep either.
Yeah. And, again, it goes back to that individuality. I think we have to evaluate what are we doing and is it having a positive effect on our sleep patterns or a negative effect? And for some of those people, that shot of bourbon prior to sleep, done habitually, has a positive effect on their sleep. I'm not going to kind of question a doctor's prescription for that. I certainly, drinking heavily before bed is not going to be good. Ideally, it should be, at least a few hours before bed. So that nightcap idea maybe is a little bit more to kind of unwind, to relax our brains a little bit, and then we move towards sleep. So a lot of times, I think in that generation that you're talking about, it was very common to have a cocktail when you got home from work and, or glass of wine or something after dinner, and considering that the kind of nightcap. But then they might be, sitting and reading and doing something else prior to bed. So again, I think it really comes down to what is impacting us individually in our sleep and what can we do to change that, to give ourselves better quality sleep so that we are going to be healthier. We're going to have better immune function. And I think, for myself, the things that I do personally that I think have a positive effect on my sleep are going to be exercising regularly and exercising at a regular time, so having a prescribed time, having a rather timed regular diet, having, turning off the electronics prior to sleep, and having that regular sleep-wake cycle. Trying to think what else I'm missing in there. I feel like there's a few other things that I do that really kind of help with the quality of my sleep. Oh, the journaling. Having a regular journaling pattern, a kind of a growth focused pattern in your life, whatever you choose to do. I mean, just having certain regular daily pattern to your life is going to go a long way toward sleeping. So, okay, you got to have that drink once a night. Do it at a regular basis. It's not like, for a lot of people, we tend to binge drink where we have several drinks on certain occasions or special occasions. That's going to certainly disrupt our sleep. But the things that we do regularly and we get our body in regular cycles, our bodies are designed to be very cyclical. We have a sleep-wake cycle, getting that melatonin cranking up when it's supposed to, having regular light-dark cycles, and so as it gets close to bedtime, closing the blinds and turning down the lights and allowing our bodies to begin to prepare to go to sleep, it'll be much better than having all the lights on, blast them on, and then turn them off. It's bedtime. And so those are the things I would strongly recommend for us to do in order to, shall we say, sleep well as we age well.
Yeah, sleep well as well, you've definitely mentioned it throughout the whole thing. Like, it's critical. Sleep truly is critical, and it's not only good for your physical health, but your mental health, your emotional health, and all of this ties in with aging well.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to say too is that well-centered fitness approach. When we consider the balance between our spiritual, our physical, our intellectual, emotional, and social, all of that, that works to counter some of the anxiety that we might have that might be impairing our sleep. It gets our mind focused away from kind of our own self-interest to the interests of others. It, again, physical and the spiritual are very closely tied. All those things are going to help to impact our ability to sleep and obviously then age well.
Aging well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.